Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Startup Conclave podcast. Today, we're joined by someone who has built companies across multiple technology waves, protected over 2 billion products across 80 global brands, and turned anti-counterfeiting from a niche issue to a mainstream business priority. He's the founder and CEO of Acviss Technologies, a serial entrepreneur and an active angel investor supporting passionate founders. Mr. Vikas Jain. Sir, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here.
Yeah. So I thought let's start with a rapid fire round to keep things on a lighter note. Sure. Some questions are controversial, but not difficult for sure. All right. So counterfeiting or cybersecurity, which is the bigger hidden crisis today?
Okay. Tough one. So I mean, as a founder who's solving the problem of anti-counterfeiting, solving the problem of counterfeiting, I would say counterfeiting is a bigger problem because the money that is made out of counterfeiting actually is funding a lot of illegal activities, like terrorism, drug trafficking.
Yeah.
So given that, plus the hidden dangers of consuming fake products, is going to affect a lot of people than what probably cybersecurity would. So I would say, personally, I would say counterfeiting is a bigger issue.
No, I agree. It's a domino effect when it comes to counterfeiting. Yes. Blockchain, overhyped or underutilized?
Okay, I think it was overhyped and now it's probably underutilized. I think the problem is when it became mainstream, it was overhyped. And now I think it's probably not caught up as much as it should have. I think the fact that it has to be decentralized, people are afraid of losing control, etc.
Yeah, that is true.
So hence I think it's underutilized. I think there is still good scope where we are seeing good use cases being developed. So I believe we would see good blockchain use cases coming up. So short answer, it was overhyped and now it's underutilized.
Fair. All right. What is one startup buzzword you think should disappear?
I would say, I know, probably, I'm not sure if it's the right word, but AI. Reason why I say that is, a lot of people just use AI, especially startups, even though they may not be doing mainstream AI work. Yeah. It shouldn't disappear in the sense that, I'm talking about people stopping to use AI. What I'm trying to say is people misusing AI is what should stop, right? I mean, the fact that every time you hear a pitch, every time you see a startup, people talk about AI. So I think that's what is being overused is what I would say.
Yeah, so maybe not using AI just to make yourself look attractive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Okay. A founder's trait you instantly distrust?
I think overcommitting things is probably something which I would distrust. I mean, I've seen people who would probably talk something or rather pitch. In some of the founders, I've seen pitches where, they probably do exaggerate a few things, right? I think that's probably one of the factors which I would definitely mistrust. I think it's very important to be grounded, understand and what is the reality. I think that's very important.
Yeah, that's very fair. Okay. One thing big corporations must learn from startups.
Innovation. I think that's something with innovation and being able to move fast. I think we see a lot of startups, a lot of enterprises who are, not ready to innovate, are still very old school in the mindset. I think that needs to change.
Fair. Okay. On the contrary, one thing startups must learn from big corporations.
Scale. So I think the fact that, of course, corporates are corporates because they've been able to scale. And I think there is some learnings over there as to how they've been able to scale. And I think there are some good learnings in, understanding how some of these companies have been able to achieve what they've been able to achieve. I think as startups, a lot of us face this issue where we are able to grow to, 1 to 10, 10 to 50. But beyond that, I think there is good amount of learning we can get from corporates.
That is very true. And that marks the end of the rapid fire. This was a great rapid fire.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So before we get into the questions, I really have to say this. I was going through your entire LinkedIn profile and the entire breadth of your journey is so inspiring. Whether it was building early knowledge networks in 2007 or engineering roles in US, post which I think you co-founded some retail tech ventures and now you're leading Acviss.
True.
So this entire journey is very, very inspiring, especially for MBA folks like us today. And I'd like to start from this very journey and the beginning of your journey and Acviss essentially. So you've built multiple ventures across different phases of your career. What drew you toward solving the problem of counterfeiting and founding Acviss?
So I was in the US and I had a small baby when I decided to come back to India. And then when I was traveling, I incorporated basically I purchased a cream, it was a rash cream, and it happened to actually cause more rashes and allergy reactions, when I applied it on my son. And post that I realized it was not a genuine cream. It was probably a fake cream, and I was traveling at that time. I was in rural parts of India. So when I personally encountered this problem, I realized that counterfeiting is, a rampant issue. It's not just something which happens, small scale. It happens across sectors, across industries, and across geographies. So given that, it was important that, somebody has to step in and solve this problem. While there have been traditional solutions that have existed, I think we realized technology could be leveraged to do this, to solve this problem. And that's what got me interested in, starting Acviss. I think of course, the personal story behind, facing counterfeiting. And it so happened that while I was doing that, or rather when I saw that issue, I also started noticing a lot of other counterfeit products, right? For example, the plywood that we got at home, so I was also constructing home at that time, was also, counterfeit. I realized that there's a huge counterfeit plywood market in India where people just buy off-the-shelf plywood, put the stamp or put fake stamps on it and sell. So it was, like you mentioned earlier, it was a domino effect, right? Once you see something, you cannot unsee it. So started off with that and realized it's a huge market. It's a $3 trillion worth, $3 trillion problem, right? I mean, it's more than GDP of some countries. So the fact that it's so rampant, it's huge, there's a market, there's a need for a product. I think that's what prompted us to start Acviss. Yeah.
That's a great story actually, and especially with the personal angle to it. And when you're personally invested, I believe you are more passionate about whatever you're doing.
True.
And coming from that, when you did start Acviss as a baby company or as a young venture, I think it's very difficult to build that trust even when you're going to corporations, big corporations. So how did you actually get your first big corporation to trust you?
You rightly said, it's difficult to build trust. But for us, I think we got a little lucky, at least with the first customer. They had a huge problem and we went and pitched the product to them. They really liked it. And we had a customer even before we had a product. So, we got lucky after that. But after that we face this problem, right? I mean, a lot of times when you have brands or enterprises who don't trust you easily because you have a startup, the only weapon you have there is your, enthusiasm, the fact that you have a great product and the fact that you are ready to do anything to solve that problem, right? I think when they see that, and what we've also seen is of late, we do see people across on the other side, on the corporate side or the enterprise side, as where people are ready to, adopt new solutions and encourage startups. And that's what also helped us. I think the fact that you have a good product, the fact that you are really keen to solve the problem, which comes across to them. And I think if you're honest about it, it is difficult, but I think you would be able to, make a sale, get the customers onboarded. So, and the good thing is, in India, unfortunately, we do have this herd mentality where if one company does it, others want to do it.
Yes.
So we're able to get at least one or two players in that sector. It would be easier for you to now take that pitch to the other companies and say, okay, these guys are doing this. Do you also want to look at a solution? So the first two sales would be difficult, and I think after that it will help you, be able to attract other companies in that sector. In a different sector, again, it's a different game. You need to start from, point blank. So in short, make sure you have a great product and be honest about what you are doing. And of course, any startup founder is going to be very energetic. So I think that energy does drive and help you get the sale.
Yes, absolutely. And I believe passion is sort of attractive when you see that in a startup founder. So that's definitely there. But trust is one side of things. Trust is initially. And I think once you, as you mentioned, you start in a sector and then everyone in that sector, at least you build a name.
True.
But that is one thing and scale is a different thing. And at this point of time, I think you're protecting over 2 billion products,
True.
which is a huge number. So what were the decisions or the pathway that actually unlocked that kind of scale?
So what we realized was in this industry, you need to look at the problem, you need to get a bird's eye view of the problem, right? While we were solving a problem of counterfeiting, we also realized that there are other additional problems that need to be addressed. And brands typically want to work with the company which is able to address all these problems that exist for them in the supply chain. So what we realized was, being able to give a solution, a platform, which can help them not just, solve the problem of counterfeiting, but also help them trace the product to the supply chain, solve the problem of brand impersonation online. I think, being able to give, a bouquet of services or platform for them where they can basically address this complete problem of lack of trust in the supply chain is what really helped us and, get scale. Beyond that, being able to innovate. I think it's very important in this sector, especially that you are always a step ahead of the counterfeiters. So counterfeiters are of course try and it's like a cat and mouse. It's like a antivirus game, right? You would always have somebody who's always trying to be a step ahead of you. So you also need to be a step ahead of them. So innovation is key. So we are very much focused on developing new solutions. We have a very strong R&D team. We've already filed for multiple patents, and we are continuing to do that. So we recently launched a non-clonable technology version 2. We already had a version 1 which has been working for quite some time, and version 2 is what we launched, and that basically means that if we need to continuously innovate, and the version 2 is also helping us scale as much as what version 1 did. So innovation is very important, and that's something which has really helped us, along with the fact that we're able to solve the complete problem of lack of trust in the supply chain.
Right. So that actually just hit something in me, that in movies we often hear this, that the police officer will say that we need to think like the criminal. True. And that's the only way we can stay one step ahead of them. And I believe that is something that you need to do over here as well, because you need to think like them to make sure that you're a step ahead of them.
And you won't believe, a lot of times I've asked my team if we are able to find a counterfeiter sometimes, because you need to understand what they think and what the psyche is.
Definitely.
And that will also help you make your product better. So you're very right about what you just said.
Yeah. Right. But now coming a little bit to the entrepreneurship side of things. So you've been a serial entrepreneur, and I think just now when Professor Patro mentioned 2 or 3 ventures, since I had been through your profile, I knew that question did not apply to you, because I think you're way past that. So how do you think your leadership has changed? Because you've been an entrepreneur for so long, it must be very different from what you started out with.
Well, very much. I mean, I think when you start off, and it's especially your first venture, you're very naive, right? Of course, sometimes you're overly optimistic at times, when you're starting off, which could be good, but I think sometimes, like I earlier mentioned, you need to be grounded as well, right? So you start off being very overly optimistic, and then I think over a period of time you realize, a lot of things, especially the fact that a lot of people might say, things about what your startup is doing, whether it's, in the right path or not. Your own intuition is very important. Right. So earlier, when you start off, you would probably rely on other people's opinion a lot. And I think over a period of time, I realized that, while you respect that and do take that into consideration, you also need to be, fact that you also need to consider your intuition as well. I think that's something which I realized that, you do that, plus, you blend in your intuition and do something. After that, the second point would be, growing a team, right? Building a team, right? I think the way you would do earlier versus what I'm doing now, if I would go back 10 years in my life, I would do it differently. So the fact that earlier you probably would not look at a lot of things, not look at culture. Over a period of time, you realize culture is very important. So, culture basically makes or breaks a company. And I think that realization has come through a period of time. And the third would be in terms of, the product itself, right? Earlier, it would be, you would be attracted to the stories like what you would hear from Apple. A lot of these books talking about, Steve Jobs not caring about what the customer wants. I think that's important. Those are nice things to hear, but sometimes you get, those stories become so glamorized that you probably also start believing that's right? That while it may be applied to Steve Jobs, he's a genius, but I think as somebody, most of us probably are, not that great, right? So you also need to be aware of what really the customer wants, and only then you will be able to achieve product market fit. Sometimes just because you believe this product will do well, it may not help you succeed. You also need to be aware of what the market really wants. While the market, like I earlier mentioned, market may tell you something which may not be correct. So you need to be able to differentiate between what the real metrics are versus the metrics which are actually not that important or not relevant. So being able to absorb the metrics which are important for you and help you grow your product, not look at other people's opinion all the time, be able to trust the intuition at times as well, is I think what has really helped here.
Right. And this brings me back to a case study that we actually read, which was essentially about Google. And Google has this glamorized story, like you mentioned, that there's a bubble that they create. But I think very early on, I don't have the facts right in my head, but I think they went for a sale and the sale did not happen. And then eventually Google became Google.
True.
But essentially all of that happened was because they got lucky in a sense and that sale did not happen.
True.
So today we see the story as something that is huge and humongous, but sometimes there is a luck factor to it as well, which we don't contribute that. We just think of it as hard work. So there are a lot of things that end up building a company, which is not something that we would see when we're looking from an outside perspective.
True.
Right. That's
luck is a very important factor. I think while some of us may not agree, I mean, hard work, all of these are very important, but luck does matter in a company as well. Being in the right place at the right time. Sometimes it's your effort, sometimes it's serendipity, sometimes luck. So all that matters, and it's a similar story exists like of Netflix as well. Right? Blockbuster tried to buy it out, and it didn't happen, and then now Blockbuster is nowhere, and Netflix is $1 billion company. Yeah.
So absolutely. So luck is very important, but of course has to be complemented with hard work and your passion for everything. But you mentioned a lot of things when it came to investors, teams, multiple things like that. What was your toughest moment as an entrepreneur throughout the years?
So, I would say there are a lot of tough moments that happen when you're an entrepreneur. There are times when you're trying to close a customer, you spend a lot of time and effort, and that doesn't happen. There are times when you have one of your key employees, moving out. So there are entrepreneurship is not just one tough moment; it's a series of tough moments, right? If I had to pick one, it's very difficult. There have been times when we spent days and nights in trying to win a customer, and you lost it because you're a startup versus other company was a public limited company. Right? So those things happen, and then there have been times when you've had your most important employees leave you, and there are occasions when you get up in the morning and you don't have the drive or the energy, but you still need to pick yourself up and do it because you're leading a company and you're running a startup. So understanding that you're still a human at the end of the day, you're running a company, there will be emotions, there will be ups and downs, highs and lows. And there have been low moments as well. If you have to ask me to choose one, like I said, it's very difficult. One particular time was when, I won't say it's a low moment, but we had to take a decision. Wherein we had to basically decide whether we want to pursue this company or not. And it was a company which was in this gray area of, so I'll give you the exact story. So basically it's a company which manufactures BDs, right? And they had a huge problem of counterfeiting. And they came to us, but the thing was whether, we verified the company's credentials before we actually worked with them. So we were not able to verify whether they actually had the trademark or not, right? So, having that courage to say no, saying, we're not going to do this because we're not able to verify whether you actually own the trademark or not, is something which, we did, and I think that was courageous. But which also meant that some of the people got demotivated. Right. We missed this opportunity. So there was a general thought process in the company that, okay, we let go of this opportunity. Some of the sales guys who had probably worked on that opportunity felt demotivated. Now, getting them to be, motivated again, motivating the team was, took some time, and I think eventually we got through it because they were able to understand what the mission is, what we were working towards. So yeah, that was probably one of the...
Yeah, that's very fair. And I think saying yes is very easy. Saying no is very, very difficult. But what's more important is knowing when you have to say no.
True.
So that's definitely true. I think I'd like to change gears a little, and you are an angel investor. When I was going, like I mentioned, I went through your profile, and there are so many investments, and it was really, really inspiring to see somebody who is really passionate about supporting founders. So in today's date, what do you look for in a founder, or rather their pitch decks?
So most of my investments have been through the closed network I'm part of. So a lot of times it's either been through my alum network or through somebody whom I know. or through one of these funds whom I'm connected with. So that definitely helps. The fact that you're able to build a trust with some of these entities as a founder, I would say, if you're able to build trust, I think that would help you definitely. But beyond that, what we really look for is, simple things like, whether the team is right, whether they are able to solve this problem, whether, whether there's a product market fit for this problem or not. And, fact that, whether this company has some traction. Of course, when you're angel investing, you cannot expect the company to have a huge amount of traction, but a bit of traction is also important, right? Besides that, of course, whether the founder or the founding team has the wherewithal to handle failures, right? Whether they can take the right decisions at the right time. And I think that is very important. Or being able to take a decision with just limited amount of data. And to be able to understand the mindset of a founder is also very important, because that's what, makes or breaks a team. For example, if a company is not doing well, founder should be able to take a call and change. Sometimes not acting is also a wrong decision, right? So the founder should be able to take a call and decide what's the next thing to do, right? So, while we look at the basic things like, team, the business idea, etc., I think understanding the founder's psyche is also very important. And that's specifically what really attracts me to a company. If I'm, when I go and meet a founder, if I see that this person has the passion and has the mindset of not just handling success, but also failure, is also very important. And I say handling success is also very important. Because sometimes you see success gets to the mind of a few people. They take rash decisions. And I think that's something which we need to look at. So while we covered all these metrics, the psyche or personality of a founder or the founding team is also very important. And along with that, how do they get, how do they work with each other, right? Whether they complement each other or not. Those are two things which we look at.
All right, that's very fair. But coming to one more thing, so I'm an ex-software developer. And my friends and I used to very often think of app ideas, which is, I think, a very common thing we kids do, when we'll sit and we'll be like, okay, this is something that we can do, and we think of an app idea. But one place where this entire thing always stopped was raising capital, because we had no idea how to do that, and we're kids, so we never went forward with any of it. But what do you think is one of the biggest mistakes young founders make when it comes to raising capital?
Basically, the problem is a lot of founders build to raise capital rather than building to solve a problem.
Right.
So a lot of times they would, they would make the pitch decks look, favorable for funding versus actually favorable for the market, right? So we've seen, and then also relying on capital is also something which is, just only relying on capital is, not important, right? Being able to have an idea or rather a business model which can bring in business and help you sustain the business without capital as well. So the mindset that, okay, if I don't raise capital, what am I going to do is also important. So a lot of these people, when they come in with the mindset that, okay, if I don't get this capital, I'm not going to survive. Having a plan B about what else they can do. When I say what else, I don't mean getting into a different business model. I mean what else they can do in attracting capital or customers to the business also going to be important. So the mindset of, okay, if capital doesn't work, if venture capital doesn't work, I can bring in capital through my customers, etc., or by selling this product is also important. Secondly, I would say, and I've told this earlier also, having a practical sense of what the market is,
right.
Being realistic about numbers, being realistic about what they can achieve is also very key. So sometimes people overestimate what they can do, and sometimes I've seen people underestimate as well.
Right.
So being realistic and having a good sense of, what really would work for the market is going to be very important. Whether founders have gone ahead and actually spoken to some of the customers or not, 100 or 200 odd customers is going to be very important. Whether they have the data to do that or to basically be able to take decisions is also very key. So, founder, if we're trying to raise capital without the data, without having a good understanding of what the market is like, or without having a product that would work for the market, is actually, basically are going to be, these three things would actually be pointing towards a huge error on their judgment when they're trying to raise capital.
Fair. And I'd like to come to my final question now. And having done a couple of these podcasts and having heard a few of these podcasts, the final question is always an MBA related question. And it's always futuristic. How can we do this in the future? But right now, I think what is more important for us is what we can do right now. So I want to know, what can we do right now, or how we can leverage AI, or we can leverage the unlimited resources that we have right now to actually make sure that we can become a successful startup founder in the future.
I mean, I would say you're in an age where you're actually quite lucky. I mean, you have access to a good amount of information, and definitely there is AI, even though I told earlier AI has been misused a lot, but you are lucky in that sense in terms of, the resources that you have available. But like I said, AI should not be the means to the end. It should basically, rather it should be the means to the end, rather not be the end. It should help you create a solution. You rely on AI to help you with the decisions and not use AI to take decisions.
Right, of course.
We've seen cases where people have used AI and basically asked, what should I do here? Right? I mean, rather than that, leverage your AI to get data, get information, and then act on that information. So what MBA or other MBA students can definitely do, if the ones who are looking to start up, is the MBA gives you a good platform for basically having frameworks, right? And you have a lot of frameworks which you probably would learn while you're doing your MBA. I think being able to leverage those frameworks is going to be very important. And the fact that there are enough opportunities available, I would say somebody who is wanting to start a company should start one immediately and not overplan. We've seen sometimes, especially with engineers, I've seen that, we tend to overplan things and we want things to be perfect. One thing I would say is, there are enough opportunities available, and I think the market has opened up quite well. The fact that you have technologies available to get there. Earlier, if a non-tech founder wanted to start a tech company, that would be very difficult. And now you have solutions where you have no-code solutions, you have AI which can help you code, etc. So you can even start a tech company if you're a non-tech founder, right? So it's which also means it's competitive, but it's given you an opportunity to do something which you probably would not have had an opportunity to do earlier, right? There are enough problems available in the market where you would, where they still see there are solutions that don't exist, right? So I would say if somebody is wanting to start a company now, whether he or she has done an MBA or not, is actually to get your feet wet. It might be a small, even if it's a small exercise, you should do it. And get together with your friends, try and sell something, get a feeler of the market, get a feeler of how sales happens, how finance works, etc. And I think there's no substitute for doing things yourself, right? You can learn a lot of things in the book, you can learn a lot of things online, but actually when you get your feet wet, when you actually get on the ground, when you get into the battlefield, it's when you realize a lot of things are different. So any startup and any founder wanting to, or any person wanting to start up, I would say, get into the battlefield, learn how things work, get your feet wet, and I think those learnings are always going to help you become a better founder. Even if this doesn't work, don't get disheartened. We've seen, in fact, in my first 2 startups didn't do well. So the idea is to learn from them and move on. So have that mindset of understanding that failure in a company is not the end. You can always go ahead and move on and start something, and always take your experience as a learning experience. See what you learn from it. See what are the things you could have done differently, and make sure that you implement that in your next startup.
Definitely. Failure does teach you more than success does. True. So on that note, I think we can end this podcast. This has been a great podcast, sir. Your views are so insightful. Thank you so much for sharing your views with us.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being here. Yeah.
All right.